Hello crafters, this is Yana Smakula for SimonsSaysStamp.com. Welcome back for another Yippee for Yana episode. In this video, I'm sharing several card ideas for creating with tiny stamps. Almost every stamp set out there includes some sort of tiny supportive images, the main goal of which is to complement the main image or images in that particular set. Here I have the Bunny Blessings stamp set from Simon Says Stamp as an example. So you have the main images, the bunnies in various poses, and then the two birch tree images. Everything in between is filled with tiny images designed to help you build the scenes for the bunnies. You have flowers, eggs, butterflies, and more. We often forget about these tiny images and can even overlook them in our card making. But creating with tiny images is super fun as there are lots of ways you can use them. I encourage you to dig through your stash, pick a stamp set with some tiny images, and create with me. I thought about 3 different ways to create cards using tiny stamps. First, we can use just one tiny image repeatedly to create an entire background for a card. Second, we can use tiny images to form a simple shape on a card. And third, we can even build little scenes using these tiny images. I'm working with stamps that have coordinating dies to them, so I will be stamping my images, cutting them out, and then thinking about my backgrounds and card designs. If you are using tiny images that do not have coordinating dies, you will need to think about your card designs ahead of time and stamp a pre-planned design onto your card front. I used my Mini Misty stamping tool and I stamped a row of tiny stamps from this stamp set onto white cardstock. I pre-cut my paper into smaller panels to be able to stamp the images efficiently without having to reposition the images on the lid of my Misty, and I stamped a bunch of panels. I knew I would be using lots of these tiny stamps or tiny images, so I stamped a bunch. Next, I used my Copic markers and I colored each image using 2 or 3 shades of one color. I'm not going to focus on the coloring much as that's not the purpose of this video, but I do have marker colors listed for you in case you'd like to copy these cards or use the exact same colors that I used for your crafting. With the coloring finished, I used coordinating dies and I cut these images out. It was a lengthy process, the same as the coloring process, as I did stamp a lot of the images, but card making is my therapy, so I enjoyed it and it helped me to take my mind off some troubling things. Next, I used Simon's triangle trays and I sorted my die cuts. Flowers and bows into one tray, carrots into another tray, butterflies into another, and eggs into another. Sorting these just helped me to stay more efficient and more organized when I was making my cards. With the die cuts done, I started to build my backgrounds. My first card uses just one stamp design, a carrot, to create a linear pattern. I first stamped a sentiment in the center of the panel using VersaFine Onyx Black ink. I'm making Easter cards in this video, and the sentiment reads, "Wishing you Easter blessings." But you can use this technique in the ideas I'm sharing in this video for any other cards. These can be Christmas cards, birthday cards, general occasion cards, whatever you want to do. You can use these techniques for different theme cards. I had planned this design on a piece of scrap paper, and I often use this method. I stamp my ideas onto a piece of scrap paper before building them on an actual card. I poured my carrot die cuts onto my desk surface, and I added a foam square onto each carrot before placing the carrot onto my background. I first needed to position the carrots before I would foam mount them onto the card. I also love dimension on my cards, so that's why I made sure to use a foam adhesive behind each. You can use a different image instead of a carrot for this type of card background. For example, this can be a heart, a leaf, a tiny branch, a fruit, a tiny gift, and so many more. Once I positioned the carrots and once I was happy with the placement, I foam mounted each carrot one by one. Now, I did add a twist to my linear design by leaning one of the bottom carrots onto the one next to it. I wanted to break up the monotony of this design and to add an unexpected element to it. And I was able to do that by simply changing up the orientation of one of the carrot die cuts. Next, I added shading under each carrot using C3 and then a C1 marker. I trimmed this panel to 4 by 5¼ inches and I film mounted it onto an A2 card base, creating a very clean and simple card. For my next card, I created a heart focal point using all of the tiny images. To make things easier, I used a heart mask from Simon Says stamp. I positioned that mask stencil onto a piece of white cardstock. It was cut to 4¼ by 5½ inches, and I taped the mask in place. This gave me the perfect guide for creating my heart shape. I added the tiny shapes one by one, filling the heart in. You can also create a circle shape for an everyday card or an elongated triangle for a Christmas card. Now, building these shapes is super fun, and this really lets you utilize your tiny stamps. If you don't have a stencil mask to help you define the shape for your background, like I'm doing here, you can simply trace a shape using a pencil and then just erase the pencil once you are done. The stencil masks are optional, but they are like Misty. They make a job 1,000 times easier when creating. I foam mounted each of the shapes, and once I removed the stencil, I realized that the shape could use a few more anchor points. I felt like the heart wasn't defined enough, so I repositioned the mask and I filled the heart in using teal gems. The gems work really well for this, as they are even smaller than the tiny die cuts, and they help fill in any gaps in the background. I stamped my sentiment under the shape, and then I foam mounted this background onto an A2 card base. I also did trim it a little bit to have more white show around the background, so it's like white on white. For my third card, I used the tiny images to build an Easter scene. I did stamp, color, and cutout for grass pieces to help me ground the scene. I used another stencil mask from Simon, this time a rectangle one for A2 cards, and added 4 rows of grass separated by a happy Easter sentiment, and filled those with some Easter eggs and butterflies. Tiny stamps provide countless stamping opportunities as they allow you to create all sorts of designs and very unexpected designs as well. I hope you'll give this idea a try. Thanks so much for joining me today. Love you guys, and I'll see you next time.